Hi everyone, this is going to be a continuation of the previous video. So if you remember, we have our 2 rows, 4 columns of some content in here. I want to expand a little bit on how to get content in here and still have them lined up in that way. So instead of this 1, 2, 3, 4 numbering, we're going to go grab some lorem ipsum. We'll just start some here. So be half of that for the 1. Doesn't really matter, we can have them all the same. Maybe for the second thing we'll do something else. Alright, so now we have some pretty big blocks of text here. Maybe I want to be able to tell the difference between these rows, so I can add margin bottom, we'll do 24 pixels. Okay, that might be a bit much. 12 pixels. Okay, so now you can easily see those columns there. But when you look at this, like this text is smack up against the sides. So one thing that you can do to add some, or to give it a little space, is to add some padding. So if I go over here, so we have each of these are full width 50% or 25% of the container, which is how they all line up like that. So maybe I want to do 24 pixel padding, 12 pixel padding. Okay, so now you can see that there's a little bit of padding here, but this no longer fits up here. Why do you think that could be? Same thing with down here. It no longer fits up there. So when you set this width 25%, you're setting it to the width of what exactly? So the answer is that it depends. By default, when you set the width of an element, it applies only to the content, and it excludes the border and the padding. So the 25% of the screen actually starts here where this content starts and goes to the end of the content over here. Same with this. And because you have this set to 25% of the whole width, when you add padding in here, you're going over 100%. So instead of this whole block being 25%, it's going to be maybe like 30% or something like that. Probably not that much, or 26%. But 26 times 4 blocks is bigger than 100, so this last block is going to move down. So by default, all elements have this set up where the content, or when you set the width, it's applied to the content, and this is called box sizing content box. So here, I can write that up here. By default, they would have something like box sizing content box. And what that means is when you set the width of an element, like I said, it applies to the content and not the border or the padding around it. So this can be really annoying when you try to make layouts, but it is configurable, and there's a trick that you can do to change this. So instead of content box, we want our box sizing to be something called border box. So you can see immediately everything went back up onto its line, including all the padding, and if there's not a border, but if there were a border, it would also be in there. So when you add this, you're saying, when I specify the width of an element, I want it to include the border and the padding. So it's a good way to do layouts there. I will note it doesn't include margin. So if I were to do margin right 12 pixels, see, it's not going to fit again. So this only applies to the content and the border. What you could do is say you had margin right 1%, and then just make your whole rest of everything 24%. So now you got a little bit of margin between all of them. One thing to add, and you'll see this on the course website for the site design page, this box sizing, there's a convention for how to apply this. So move this down. you want to put it on the HTML element. So remember, HTML is what is the tag that surrounds every piece of HTML that you have. So putting it here will apply it by default to everything on your page. This is again assuming that you want to use border box at all, then you would just put it here. So this sets everything to border box. Everything to border box. Okay. And then on the off chance that there were certain elements that you wanted to set back to the default, which is content box, you could do something like this. So normally you want to avoid putting anything on the asterisk, this wildcard, just because it really sets the content for everything. But in this case, it can be helpful. So when I set these two together like this sets it for the entire page. And when I add the second line like this, the asterisk, asterisks before and after, this line lets you overwrite it later. So if, for example, you wanted to set body back to maybe content box, there, you can still do it that way. There's a link on the site design page that gives some more information about how this works and why it's important. You don't really need this margin 0, padding 0 unless you're trying to overwrite browser settings, so I'll get rid of that as well. So yeah, now you're left with this.